All right, we should be good to go.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. My name is Brian Bland Clark with Pillars of Wall Street. Those of you who I have worked with before, welcome back. Those of you who haven't, I'll do a brief introduction of myself so you know who you're talking to. I've been working with SEO now for, goodness, probably 3 or 4 years. But I went to business school, got my MBA at Emory University, Goizueta Business School, and then went to work in investment banking at Jefferies for a little over 3 years in their power group. Did Pillars of Wall Street training. I was actually the first class they ever taught way back in the day. And then left investment banking to actually come and join Pillars as a director over here. And have been teaching now for about 3.5 years. Absolutely love being able to work with people such as yourself all around the world, get to travel, and have a great time teaching what I used to do. So I obviously am doing PowerPoint today, but you may have seen me in some of the Excel classes or FSA courses, what have you, along the way. Today, what we're talking about is PowerPoint. And I will tell you right off the bat that I think that this is one of the most important short classes that we teach. And the reason is that if your undergrad or graduate experience, and I went to good schools, you guys went to good schools, was anything like mine, you have probably asked for more hands-on Microsoft Office based training from school, and the school's responses are usually, it's our job to teach you the theory, it's our job to teach you the book stuff, it's our job to tell you why. It's not our job to teach you how to use PowerPoint, teach you how to use Excel, teach you how to use Access, so on and so forth. But practically speaking, when you hit the ground running for an internship full-time position, they expect you to already know how to use these tools. And so it's this kind of catch-22 that you can find yourself in. And PowerPoint is one of those things that falls through the cracks for so many people. Certainly it did for me. I'll tell you some anecdotal stories about my internship in investment banking and my lack of PowerPoint knowledge at that point, and how I want to try and help you prevent some of those. So with that in mind today, please make sure that you have the zip file downloaded. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And in that zip file, you should have a file called PowerPoint Fundamentals and another one called Backup Files. We're going to need both of them throughout the day. Now, this is kind of a course deconstructed almost. Usually you'd come in here and I'd have a nice PowerPoint presentation up and we'd go from slide to slide and I'd talk and say very interesting things and you go, ah, yes, and take notes. Today, this is 100% hands-on. So I want you to make sure that if you have an external mouse, go ahead and plug your external mouse in. This is an Excel, you get to use a mouse, yay, pat yourself on the back. Or use your trackpad if you don't have the external mouse, but you're going to actually be doing everything with me. With that in mind, please, please, please ask questions. I emphasize this even more in the webinar world that we're in, because learning does not happen if you are not an active participant in it. So as we're going along, if you didn't catch something, if you want to know how something works, please stop and ask the question. I guarantee you someone else will have that same question. Next, PowerPoint is an enormous program. There are so many bells and whistles in here. I know everything that I know and nothing that I don't, I like to say when I talk about PowerPoint. So it may be that you ask me a question that I just say, I've never seen that, never thought of it. And we'll have to track down the answer post-course. But that's okay. Because then we get to learn together. I'm going to show you and try and impart to you a lot of knowledge of what I've gained over doing this professionally for about a decade now. And hopefully that's a help to you. With that, I'm actually going to zoom in my screen a little bit because my guess is that some of you are going to have difficulty seeing that. So I'm going to come there. I hope that's a little bit better and easier to see. So we're going to start by kind of reviewing how PowerPoint works, and then we're going to go through tab by tab, more or less, talking about all of the key functions that are working in PowerPoint, and I'm going to spend the most time on things that are the most important. Some things like transitions, animation, slideshow, those tabs are going to get very little attention because they're not really practical anymore. They were something that were used in PowerPoint a lot more when PowerPoint was a new program. Now, if you did some animation with a fly-in and the like little wipe thing, you'd say, whoa, this is a bad 1992 YouTube video or something. So people just don't really use them anymore. With that, make sure you please have this file open. We're going to start by talking about the Home tab. And when you look at my PowerPoint screen right now, take a look up here at the top. This is called the ribbon up top. They have the ribbon in PowerPoint, just how we have in Excel. And notice that I can almost guarantee you your ribbon looks a little bit different than mine. And that's going to be for a couple of reasons. First, I'm running Office 365. So it may just be that the words and the icons are the same, but it's just gray or something, or so it looks a little bit different, and that's fine. But what also is probably the case with you is that you might have more or fewer icons per all of these little buckets here. So if you look, and what I mean by bucket, I have these slides with these buttons here, font with all of these paragraphs, so on and so forth. If I were to zoom out, let me go back to my recommended resolution. Look at how many more I have now. And what the important takeaway there is that PowerPoint is automatically going to fit however many icons as you have space for. If I pad or window this down, see how it has even fewer now? Everything's just a breakout. So if I say, look on the top left and click the, here's the Format Painter button, for example, but it doesn't say Format Painter because there's just not enough text to show it. So if I see the words on my screen, but you don't see it on yours, just check it out because the icons will all be there. Sometimes you might just have to click a drop-down menu or something to get to them as we work through PowerPoint today. This is going to be important for you to know because if you work on your work computer, then your home computer, then your laptop, and so on and so forth, transitioning between different computers, you might say, where is this button? Where is this thing that I learned about? It's there. It may just be collapsed in order to save space. So the Home tab. The Home tab is really a catch-all of the most common things that we are going to use. We're going to start off today talking about some of the things that you might have seen before. I'm going to tell you some shortcut keys. Some of the shortcut keys you may know, like Control B is bold and Control I is italics and so on and so forth. But PowerPoint is a little bit different than Excel. PowerPoint, there's less of an emphasis on learning traditional shortcut keys. And I can give you an example why. Let's say I wanted to do some kind of alignment or something. Well, Alt is always our shortcut key. So always, it's the shortcut key to get up to the ribbon and we can see letters. And as we start going through the menu, let's say I want to go to Home, I can press H. And then if I wanted to go to any other thing, you can see the letters popping up as we go. But when you start talking about some of the shortcuts in here, they can get pretty crazy. So if I wanted to align something, I could press Alt J D for shape format because that's intuitive. And if I want to press align, then I have to press A twice. And then if I wanted to align it in middle, I need to do M. There's no world in which an intuitive shortcut key is Alt J D A M in order to align middle. I hope we can all agree upon that. So there's less of an emphasis on using ribbon shortcut keys compared to Excel, where shortcut keys are usually only a few keystrokes, and usually they start with the first letter of the word. So it's pretty intuitive once you start doing it. PowerPoint just isn't that way. At the end of the course today, I will make sure that we leave time to talk about how we set up shortcut keys and can map them. And that's on this quick access toolbar up here. You'll see that mine definitely looks different than yours. And everyone might look a little bit different than the next person because we can all customize the shortcut keys that we use most. But today isn't about the shortcut keys as much, but we will talk about some. So how this is going to work is we have instructions on the left-hand side of the slide and kind of exercises on the right. So as you're following along with me, I want you to be practicing these keystrokes. I want you to be practicing doing with me. If you just watch, I was making the joke earlier, teaching someone PowerPoint without them doing it is like teaching someone how to drive a car by reading a book or watching a YouTube video and never touching a steering wheel and then handing them a driver's license. It's just not going to work. You have to practice along with me. So let's start with some of the features on the Home tab. I'm going to come back over and click on the Home tab. What can we do? We can bold something. So in the font section, this is always on the Home tab, you can hit Control B anywhere in a word in order to bold it. Similarly, you can hit Control I to italicize it or Control U to underline it. And I'm just pressing Control U right now anywhere in the word. Now, some of the shortcut keys that you might have learned in one of our Excel classes will carry over. So if you recall from taking an Excel course that if you hold down Control and left or right arrow, it'll jump from cell to cell until you run out of data or find new data. Same thing in PowerPoint. And for that matter, same thing in Word and Outlook. If I press control right arrow or left arrow right now, it's jumping from the beginning of the word to the end of a word. See how it's jumping along the bold italics underline there? So you can navigate still quickly with your shortcut keys that you're used to if those are fairly intuitive by now. So I'll press Control B and hold down Control, press my right arrow to come into italics, press Control I, and in underline, I'll press Control U. Now, one of the key factors that makes a slide in PowerPoint look professional.
Okay, bye. Have a good one. So sorry.
Hello? Caught someone's hot mic there.
That's all right. I've muted her. Everything's
okay.
fine.
I was like, bye, man. We just started. Okay. One of the things that makes a PowerPoint presentation look really professional is consistency in font faces and font sizes. So a font face is like Arial or Calibri or Times New Roman, not Wingdings. We don't use Wingdings. Font sizes, well, that's just how big something is. So usually in a presentation, you're only going to have a few different font sizes, and you're going to have the same font face throughout the entire presentation. So right here, I see that it says I'm in, I want to make this Arial, but right now, if you look up at the top, it says it's out in Algerian. So if I want to change the font face, I can't just come up here and click and come down to Arial. Shortcut key, for those of you who are wanting to know these, it's the same shortcut key as Excel. So Alt-H for home, FF for font face, and then I could just type in Arial. To change the font size, I can come up here and click on the drop-down menu, or same shortcut key as Excel here, Alt-H, FS, font size, and I can type in 14. Now, once you do an action like this, there's a handy little tool, and that's called the Format Painter. So if you look up here in my section, it's in the top left under clipboard next to paste. There's a little paintbrush here. And if I select something that I like and then double click on the Format Painter tool, I can actually go around and click on anything in this presentation, and it's going to make whatever I click on identical to what I started on. So I started in the word Arial, which is an Arial size 14. So now everything else that I click on immediately becomes Arial 14. Or I can do an entire selection to make it Arial 14. So if you recall from Excel, we use the paste special, paste format a lot, where we'll copy something and then Alt-HVST to paste special and paste just the format. You can do the exact same thing here, where you can just get one word or one section looking correct, and then just go around and use the Format Painter to fix your entire presentation. Any questions so far?
Hi, how did you get the painter tool again?
On your home tab, it's in the top left-hand corner. It's this little paintbrush. If you click it once, like if I just click once here, it'll let me format something one time. So I can come over and I'll click on the word underline, for example. And then you notice that my Format Painter in the top left is no longer selected. I'll hit Control Z to undo so you can see that one more time. I'll click on it, and then when I click underline, notice it's highlighted right now. When I click underline, boom, no longer highlighted, but the underline is now changed to the same format. If instead I double click, now I can go around and click as many times as I want, just like the F4 key in Excel.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hi. I'm not sure if I missed it or not, but will you be going through like the basic thought process when creating a deck from scratch as far as like how to best organize it?
So this course is a two-part course. We're kind of doing the first part today, and the second part of how this course is designed is actually building a presentation from scratch. So we're probably not going to talk about presentation creation, how to organize it, because there's a lot of different ways depending on what your job function is. Like I could talk for half an hour right now just about your typical sell side, buy side presentation. They're all structured exactly the same way. Rating agency presentation, debt presentation, equity, so on and so forth. There's just standard for all of those, but that's not necessarily applicable to everyone and outside of scope for what we're talking about today. But good question.
Thank you.
It could be that we could tack on in the future, the PowerPoint part 2, if you will, where we actually build a sell side presentation deck and walk through how to think about constructing those type of presentations. Today is more about before you begin building presentations, you have to know how to use the tool effectively, or you'll just be spinning your wheels for a long time. So the next thing to talk about here is the alignment. So aligning things in PowerPoint becomes very easy using the align tools. So what can I do here? I can align text under the paragraph. Right now it's aligned left, but I could align right, or I could align center. The one on the far right is called justified. And that's what you'll see for like newsprint, where the spacing between the words changes in order to fill up the entire text box. Not really used in a setting outside of the news. Legal documents will be justified, but typical PowerPoint presentations, not really touched all that much. So I'm going to hit right here in order to align that to the right. The paragraph tool is helpful for a lot of things, though, not just alignments. We could also do our bullet points or do our Roman numerals, number, something. But come down here to this radio button and look where my mouse is right now. These are called radio buttons. It has a little arrow pointing to the bottom right. And I'm going to click into the 1.5 line spacing without spacing before or after. And I click on this radio button and it brings me to this pop out. This allows me to adjust anything that I want manually with the spacing in order to make sure that an entire text box has consistent spacing. So undoubtedly, somewhere through your college career, you were writing a paper in Word and you said, oh my gosh, there's supposed to be 10 pages and I'm only at 7.5, I'm only at 9, maybe it's 13 and I need to get it down to 10, whatever. And you were like, well, I'll just affect the line spacing a little bit. And maybe you came into this tool, or maybe you just started changing font sizes all over the place. We all did it, right? We all went to college. We all did the same thing. So I get it. Here is how we can change those spacings in PowerPoint, but it's the exact same in Word. So what am I asking to do? Change the line spacing to 1.5, 0 inches before and after. So before and after, I'm going to change this down to 0. And line spacing to 1.5. So before text, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to give it an indentation of 1.5.
Sorry, how'd you get this pop-up?
It's a little radio box in the bottom right corner of the paragraph box.
I see it. Thank you.
What's really powerful about this is that after you decide what you like, you can select an entire, list of bullets. So I'll click over here in this left text box and I can grab all of these and I can change the spacing here. I could take this out to 1.5 for an entire selection in order to standardize everything. And that's the key. There's nothing that will annoy a banker, anyone who's worked in consulting or finance, really, because those are the two most anal retentive about presentations. Nothing that'll bother them more than things not lining up, spacing not being the same, fonts being off, font sizes being off. It's one of the most obvious things that sticks out like a sore thumb to anyone who spent any time in this industry. So knowing how to do these things is very important. Okay, I'm going to jump over here to the left text box and want to talk about something else here on the Home tab that's very useful, and that's how do we insert new slides. So if I come up here to the top left, kind of the second bucket over, it says slides, and there's a drop down here where I can click on new slide, and it gives me a few slides. Now, you might have noticed this button before and clicked on it in PowerPoint, and you had different slides than what we have right here. Right here, I only have 3, title, divider, and title with content. Know that the slides that are available to you are governed by something called the slide master. And we're going to talk about that here in 10, 15 minutes, something like that. But we can actually pre-make all of these slides so that when we actually put them into a presentation, all of the formatting is standardized and we have containers for everything we want to do. So if we want to insert a new slide, we can always come and just grab it from this drop-down menu right here. Now, depending on where you might be working, know that different banks, different consultancies, different shops all over the street are going to use different types of add-ins in order to govern these. So some like JP Morgan, Jefferies, Bank of America, Nomura, I'm just rattling off companies that I've worked with and I know how they do it, are actually going to have a macro add-in pack. There'll be a new tab. And so instead of inserting a new slide from the Home tab right here, you'll actually insert a new slide using their macro. So I tell you this because it's just a practical thing that you should know now. that make sure that you're inserting it once you start working in your internship, your full-time position, that you're grabbing the new slides from the right theme so that they all tie and look correct. But the standard place that we grab them, right here on the home tab, new slides. Questions on that? Okay, last thing that I want to talk about today on the home tab is inserting shapes, because you use shapes all the time. So I'm going to put a star in here because I like stars. So I'll come up here to the drawing section, and I have a star in the bottom right-hand corner. If you don't have a star in the bottom right-hand corner, no problem. Just click on this little drop-down box here, and all these shapes will pop out. We're going to select a star. And if you ever said, I want to make a shape and I want it to be nice and even, but eyeballing it is rather difficult, right? We can all tell that this is too stretched wide, and we can all tell that this is too stretched tall, but how do I get it perfect? How do I do that? And the answer is you just hold down Shift. So while holding down Shift, and I'm keeping my mouse button held down, I can drag and it keeps the proportions constant, which is very important for something like a star or a picture of someone's face or anything where you really need the ratios to be not close, not similar, exact. And that's what we have here, a star that we want it to be exact. I'm going to shrink it just a little bit. I'm holding down Shift in order to shrink it down. And I want to format it with yellow fill and a red border. Now, notice that when I click on this shape, I jump to a new tab called the Shape Format tab, where it has all of these different options in order to format the shape. I can format it there. Yeah, the zoom controls kind of popped up over my PowerPoint. And I want to do a shape fill here. I'm going to fill it with yellow. And then I'm going to give it a red border. So I'll use the shape outline tool right here in order to, change the colors to whatever I want to be. Now, notice that I have some shape styles here. These shape styles are also governed by my slide master. So on the slide master, which we'll talk about, you can put in a standard color palette. So whatever the 6 colors that govern your entire presentation are. And then PowerPoint's actually going to flex on those in order to give you here's the standard ones right here, but you'll notice it does different versions of it. So this one has a little bit of gradient to it. These down here have the what's the word I'm looking for? I can't find PNG. There we go. The transparent background in there, just a border, so on and so forth. But right now we're just doing the basic shape fill, give it an outline. Any questions on the home tab before we move on to the insert tab?
I just quickly going back to when you pressed the paintbrush and double clicked each individual word. Could you go over that one more time?
Yeah, so let's say that I really like everything to be bolded. So I'll click on the word bold here, and we can see that the font is bolded. If we couldn't tell because the font's like a tricky font or something, you can always look up at the font bucket up here, and you'll see that the bold is selected. If I double click on the paintbrush, then I can select whatever I want, and it's going to make everything bold. It's going to make everything the same font face, everything the same font size, so on and so forth. It's going to copy all of the font attributes of that word, bold, and apply them to everything. So Format Painter, which is what this is just that. It format paints. It takes all the formatting attributes and paints them on there.
I got it now. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Other questions? Okay, we're going to jump on down to the Insert tab, which is the next tab over. Lots of things to talk about here. We see that we also have a new inserts or a new slide insert here as well. So multiple ways that we can insert new slides. Same, everything that I said before applies. So we can go ahead and do that. New slide, and maybe I'll put in a title and content slide. See that it's pre-formatted with a container, and it's named title and content. We can call that whatever we want in our slide master. We'll talk about that in a second. So, hey, title up top, content down below. Coming down to the next slide, which is now slide 7 in the presentation because we inserted a new one. We're now going to learn how to insert tables. Tables are quite useful tools for either organizing data, showing data, displaying data. You'll use them for all sorts of things. So let's talk about how to do it. Now, the first way that you can build a table is to not build it at all. And I know that sounds counterintuitive. You're saying, wait, you said build a table, but don't build it at all. What does he mean? What I mean by that is if you already have an asset, such as a table or a picture or a text box or something that's formatted well and looks how you want it to look, and you just really need to modify the data, don't create a new one, copy and paste. Save yourself the time. Build on what has already been created and don't try and build from scratch. So that's the first thing we could do, but that's not really the exercise here. We're going to talk about how to build it from scratch. So we're building a 5 by 5, meaning 5 columns, 5 rows. So I'll come up here to tables on the insert tab, and I can kind of drag my mouse out until I get a 5 by 5 grid up here. And then I can click on the box in order to insert that 5 by 5. So I'll just click, and here's my 5 by 5 table. Now, the color scheme is identical. It's just the standard color scheme for these colors here. But obviously the width and the height are a little bit different. So I'm going to drag this box down here. How do I drag a table? Click anywhere in the table and then move until you see the little arrows on the border. And I'm just going to drag it down here. And if I want the table to be the exact width as this other table, which I do, click into the table that's already finished and click on Layout. And on Layout, you're going to see a box that says Table Size here. And this tells me exactly what its measurements are. It's 2.03 inches tall, 3.69 inches wide. So I can now click into the other one, and I'm going to do the width first, 3.69 inches. So I can click into the new one, 3, and then click up here to width and say 3.69 and hit enter. Returning height is 2.03. And I see that my height here is also 2.03. So nothing to do there. And I can kind of drag it into the middle of this box now. That's how you can match something's proportions exactly, not guess, not kind of eyeball it. You'll see people doing one of these numbers where they'll drag it over the other and say, well, is it the same? I don't know. Maybe it's a little different. Yeah, it's close enough. Now, don't have to settle for close enough. You can get it exactly by using the table size. And this table size is the exact same when we're talking about images, shapes. There's always a box that pops up in the top right up here that'll tell you everything's height and their width. So no guessing is needed. Now, the next thing that we can do is we can insert some text. So I can write cat1. I'll press tab in order to jump to the next box and write cat2, tab, cat3, cat4. Come into my columns and I'm arrowing down, cat1, arrow down, cat2, arrow down, cat3, arrow down, cat4. Now, this obviously expanded our cells in order to allow for the text that was longer or taller than the box that we had space for. And that's because our font sizes, font faces might be a little bit off. So let's return to our pre-formatted one. And I'm going to click on the word cat1 here in black text, and then click on the Home tab. And that's going to show me that it's Arial size 12. So I could come over here and select all of these categories and say Arial, it's already Arial, and type in 12. Lots of options for how I could do that. I could hit Alt-H, FS for font size. I just this time clicked in there and typed. I could also, I'm going to hit undo now, Control Z. I could select these categories, which are already pre-formatted, use my format painter. So I could double click on those and then paint those on the categories. So lots of different ways to accomplish the same task here. I'm going to select now across my columns here. I'm going to do it a little bit differently this time. I'm going to hold down Control and Shift and use my right arrow to select all 4 cells. Same shortcuts that work in Excel there work in PowerPoint. I'll do it the shortcut method this time. Alt-H for home, F for font, S for size, and this is size 12. And to make sure that our table retained the same height as our other one, I'm going to check the height. It was 2.03. So I'll come back to layout, and there it is, 2.03 right at the top. so I know it's the same size. So other things that we can do that we didn't do in this table over here, but that might make it look a little bit more professional, is I'm going to select, using the mouse this time, all 4 of my header columns. And I'm going to come up to alignment under the layout. This is also on your home tab in the same place, but I'm going to do it on the alignment tab here. And I'm going to click align middle and align center. One of them, the bottom one, is align top, middle, or bottom. So that's telling you its position in height inside the cell. This top one is left, center, or right. So they're different. One of them is moving up and down an x-axis, and one of them is moving up and down a y-axis, or left and right on an x-axis. You know what I meant. But having it aligned in the middle and the center can make it look quite nice. Same thing with these categories down the y-axis over here. I'm going to go ahead and align them in the center in order to make them look just a little bit better. Okay, any questions on how we inserted the table or did some basic formatting there?
Hi, I don't have on my PowerPoint version the layout tab.
So the layout tab, check out mine right now. There's no layout tab. It only comes when you click into an option that you have the ability to edit. So click on a table and the layout will appear with options that are applicable to the table. If I click on this text box, no layout tab, it's just saying shape format, so I could format the shape. If I click on this little picture over here, it gives me the picture format, which are applicable to pictures. So certain tabs will appear and disappear depending on what you're doing.
I see, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Other questions? Okay, we're going to move on to insert a picture. Lots of different ways to insert a picture. You can literally click and drag from the internet and drag and drop a picture directly into your presentation. You can go to the insert tab and you can click on, in the top left, for me, it's my 4th icon over, insert pictures from the device, stock images that they have online, so on and so forth. Typically, what I find myself doing the most is going to the folder. I find it easier to just open up the folder that has all of the images that I want to use and then click and drag into the presentation, as opposed to using this right here and clicking and coming this way. It's just a little bit more difficult. Oh, there's a picture of my spouse and I hiking last year. Hiking up Mount Marcy. It's a good hike. Anyway, so I'm going to open up this file that says PowerPoint backup files. And I have all of these images here, and I'm going to drop in the Coca-Cola image. And I'm just going to click and drag and drop it into the presentation. Now, you'll see at the bottom, there's it says alt text logo company name. That is for accessibility reasons. So if you are wanting to label something, particularly for people who are visually impaired for online, if you were doing this for an online presentation or publishing it and they couldn't see Coca-Cola, if you didn't put right here logo and then type in Coca-Cola, then they would have no way of knowing that this picture was Coca-Cola's logo. However, for a PowerPoint presentation that we're just printing off in a deck and then binding and handing to someone, no need to fill out all this alt text because it's never going online, so that text would never be read by a browser. So not something that I think I ever did. This wasn't even available in older versions of PowerPoint. But know that this is here if you were to be publishing things to the web for one reason or another. Okay, so I'm going to click on the Coca-Cola image here and a bunch of different things to talk about. First, notice that this image is much larger than our smaller friend over here. So if I want to match it exactly, let's talk about the different ways that we can do this. So I'm going to start off. I need to move these controls somewhere else. They're consistently in my way. There we go. So I'm going to click on the image that I like, the one that was already done, and click on Picture Format on the top right, and I'll see that its height and width are exactly 2.77. So I'll click on the image that I just dropped in, and I can change the height to 2.77. Now, yours should have automatically changed the width to 2.77. Why is that? On the size bucket here, click on that radio pop-out button on the bottom right. My mouse is going around it right now. And when I click on it, you'll see that in my version of PowerPoint, it's going to pop out a little window here that says Format Picture. If you have an older version, you'll actually have a box that pops out that'll be in the middle of your screen right now that has more or less the same information. It just presents a little bit differently. But the reason that the height and width remain constant is a very, very, very important button called Lock Aspect Ratio. This is the button that you want to make sure is selected 100% of the time when you're modifying images. I'll tell you a funny story on the reason why. One of the pages that gets put into every presentation is a team page where everyone's image on the deal team is put there along with their name, and if you're senior enough, perhaps a quick bio as well. Well, pictures are taken by firms over usually on your first day, your second day, something like that. And if you've been with the firm for 15, 20 years, well, whatever camera they used way back when is not the same as what they're using today. So all of the different images are going to have different height and width and resolution and whatever over the years. So the bane of analysts' experience, whether they're working at JP Morgan or Blackstone or what have you, is making these team pages with all the pictures look the same. And the way that analysts will try and make it happen is to do one of these numbers. They'll uncheck the lock aspect ratio and they'll just scale it just a little bit. And they'll say, no one can tell the difference between those two. It still looks like Coca-Cola, so on and so forth. Yeah, it looks like Coca-Cola's logo to you. It may look like Coca-Cola's logo to me. It does not look like Coca-Cola's logo to someone who works at Coca-Cola. They immediately can tell that it's too skinny. And that's happened on team pages all the time where I did this, probably my first week or something like that, trying to make one work. And the senior banker, when he's sitting down flipping the book, circled his picture and he's like, "What, Brian, am I too fat?" And I had nothing. I didn't know how to handle that situation when someone's asking me if I'm calling them fat, on like my first time that I'm ever meeting with them. And then he laughed and said, "Just fix the image." He was just playing with me, thankfully. But know that people are immediately going to know if their face got elongated or stretched or distorted in some way. So that's not how we're going to make things fit. So I'm going to hit undo here, Control Z, a couple times in order to get my 53% locked on both. And then I'm going to lock my aspect ratio. Questions on inserting a picture or resizing an image? These same tools work for an image like a Coca-Cola's logo or a picture of a person or even a shape. See here, I have something in the chat box. I haven't been monitoring the chat box. Apologies. How can I get that to pop up? Why is it not popping up when I hit chat? There it is. Oh, someone talking about, yeah, logo intern. Yep. Okay, no questions. I'm going to move on to charts then.
Yeah, sorry, Jaden just said something, but also, how do you lock it just really quickly?
Lock the aspect ratio. If you just click on an image, if you click on an image and click picture format, the tab up top, and then click size, the little radio pop-out button, there's a box here that'll say lock aspect ratio. If your resolution is a lot higher than what mine is right now, this lock aspect ratio can actually be right in the size bucket, so you don't actually have to click that extra radio button to get to it. It just depends on how high your resolution is.
Thanks.
Yep. Can I do that one more time? The format background. Not sure what you mean by format. Okay, never mind. Cool. Haven't formatted any backgrounds yet. We are going to be changing some backgrounds, but not yet. It's, for whatever reason, the tools in Zoom are fairly clunky right now for me to be able to see what's going on in the chat box. So if at all possible, just unmute your microphone and ask me, because I'm having to click on that chat button a whole bunch of times before it opens up. And then my menu is disappearing off the screen so I can work. So I'm only checking it every 5 or 6 minutes. So feel free to just unmute your microphone to ask a question. Okay, we're going to talk about charts now. Charts are going to be made in one of two ways. The first way is you can make them natively in PowerPoint, where all the data will live inside your PowerPoint presentation. The second way is to make the chart in Excel and then paste it afterwards into PowerPoint. Different people and different groups and different banks and different everything all have very strong opinions on what is the correct way to do it. So the correct way for you to do it is however you're told to do it. I'm going to show you right now how to build it in PowerPoint because that's the point of this course. But know that where you're working, they may say, oh no, all charts are built in Excel, then they're tied to the model, and then we use a dynamic linking tool in order to link it to PowerPoint. And that's perfectly fine. Just do what you're told. But right here, we're going to show how to build them in PowerPoint. So I'm going to go to Insert, and I'm going to click on Chart right here under the Illustrations bucket. And I'm going to use a stacked column. Stacked column is what I use 99% of the time when working in PowerPoint. I'll talk about why a little bit. And I get a couple things pop up. First is this little mini Excel. And what do I mean by mini Excel? I don't have all of the options and tools in Excel. This is a very, you can call it like Excel Lite, like back when everyone had two versions of an app in the App Store, the Lite version that was free and the full version. This is kind of that free version of Excel, if you will. Second is we get this chart title popping up. Now, I used a stacked column chart here. Why do I always use stacked column charts instead of doing something else? And the reason is a stacked column chart gives me the most flexibility for being able to label things. Because when you do a stacked column chart, as I'll show you, you can change the color of boxes to no fill so that no one can see them. And then you can put labels on them that format very nicely. More on that in a second. But first, all we have is one group of data. So I'm going to come over here to Series 3 in Excel, hit Control and Shift, and then delete it in order to get rid of it. And then I'm going to come back to my PowerPoint and click on this light blue column here. And I'm going to come up to Format. And I'm going to click on Shape Fill. And I'm going to click on No Fill. So when I click out of PowerPoint or out of that, out of that chart, it looks like there's no box there, but there actually is a box, which means that I can add labels to that box in order to give myself optimum flexibility. So in the presentation, no one would know, but I know. Let's go ahead and change some other things here. I'm going to get rid of these axes labels. Clicking into Excel, I need to call this first quarter. So I'm going to change my labels, copy and paste that down to be second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter. Automatically updates in PowerPoint as we work. In PowerPoint, I can delete my legend. Then I can change my data here. Series 1, it's going to be 5.5, 7.5, 8.5, and 9.5. Then I'm going to copy that data and paste it on Series 2. So that it's identical between the two.
How did you just remove that legend?
If I can hit undo, let's see how many, oh, don't have to undo too many times. You can just click on the legend and then press the delete key. Good question. Sorry, I didn't narrate that as I was doing it. Not backspace, delete. Now let's make this chart the correct size. So I'll click into the finished one, click on format, and I see that it's 2.76. So I'll do the new one, 2.76, and hit enter. My width is 4.25, okay. 4.25, enter. And I can drag this down, and I'm going to delete the box so that I don't have that text there. Okay, we're starting to look a lot better now, starting to look like we know what we're talking about. I'm going to close this Excel window here by clicking the X in the top right because I have all of my data in there, so I don't need to see it anymore. I'll change the chart title. You can change the chart title text by just clicking on it and clicking into the word, and I'll hit Control A to select all. Then I'll type sales and in dollar millions. One of my biggest struggles in building presentations was to label my units. It's absolutely critical to label your units. What is this? Sales in euros, sales in dollars? Is it in thousands? Is it in millions? Did I only sell $5.50? What is it? So you have to label, whether you label it along an axis, Y, X, whether you label it in a legend, whether you label it in the title. That's all dependent upon the presentation and what kind of style you're going for. The important thing is that it has to be labeled. Okay, I'm going to click into a column here. So I'm going to click on fourth quarter, but it doesn't really matter which one I do. And then I'm going to come up to chart design. And I'm going to come to the very top left and click add chart element. And I want to add a data label. So I'll click data label and I'm going to click center. And we'll see that the text appeared. There's my data labels in the center. Now, if I click on the label, notice that all 4 of them are selected. So first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter all select when I click once. If I click a second time, I'll select just a single label. Do this at your own peril. What do I mean? In general, the 99% of the time, any changes you want to make to all of them. So you're almost never going to want to just make a change to one label because then it'll look different than everything else. There are a few exceptions, but in general, you'll want to adjust all of them. So I select them all, and I'm going to come up to home, and I'm going to change the font color under the font section to white. There we go. Now, what's another thing that I could do? Instead of changing the font color to white and putting it in the middle, as we see here, I could have done something else. So I'm going to select these data labels in the middle and hit delete to get rid of them. And now I'm going to click on those ghost boxes, those no fill boxes above. So see how I have them all selected? And I can do the exact same thing. I can hit chart design, add chart element, data label, and then put it inside the base. So because I have this box here that allows me to flexibly put numbers and have the spacing identical on every single one, I can put something inside the base of this. Now you might say, hey, I could add a chart element, data labels, and I could put it inside the end here, or I could put them, in all sorts of places with a single one, right? So what's the problem? Well, if you have multiple boxes stacked up, so maybe we're doing sales by channel. So let's say this is Walmart sales. So we have Sam's Club and we have retail stores and we have online. Let's say that's how they're doing it, those 3. Then really, I might want a total at the very top of that column instead of just having each one individually. That's why having this last little ghost box is so helpful. It's a very flexible way to be able to show what the total of the column is. And if you just set up your charts from the get-go as a stacked column, it's always there as an option. I'm going to hit Control Undo a few times in order to get back to how we're supposed to look. Any questions so far?
Hi, yes. How did you make them ghost? Yeah, those boxes.
Yeah, so when we were editing the data, and you can edit the data by clicking on the chart and then right click and then hit edit data, and you're going to get this little Excel pop-up. I just deleted all of the third column but left the second column in, and then it was a light blue color if memory serves. I just clicked on the light blue boxes and then went up to format and hit shape fill and no fill. So we can see they're still there. There they are. I just made them with no fill.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Additional questions on that?
How did you get the numbers inside the boxes?
Yep, that's going to be chart design, add chart element, and then data labels right here. And I hit insert in the center. And then I clicked on the labels and chose the font color white.
Can you do that one more time? I'm sorry.
Yep, I'll just delete them out so we can see it. So if I click on the chart design tab, add chart element, data labels, center. They're there. And then if I click on a data label, you could go to format, or you could go to home. I'm going to go to home, and I'm going to change the font color to white.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Additional questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
How did you get the same data in the new chart?
We just typed it in manually, although we could have copy and pasted.
Oh, okay. So for the multiple series, are we just doing series 1?
I did series 1 and series 2. So I'll click edit data here. And the reason I did series 1 and series 2 is that if I wanted to add the data to the bottom of this chart, so it looks at the bottom of this column, so it looks like it's at the top of this one. If I did a different number, then it wouldn't show me the data point. So let me give you an example. I'm going to add data labels to the bottom here. So chart design, add chart element, data labels, insert in the base. These numbers here on the series 2 data point are identical to series 1. So it really looks like a label of the color teal one. But if I change these to 9 or something, now it's not at all reflective of what's going on below. So we're basically being duplicative. If I was going to, let's say we wanted to do another one here. And let's say that these columns are this plus 1, right? And then I'll do the format here. I'm just doing something off the cuff here to illustrate a point. I'll make these this color, and then I'll make the top one no fill. Let's make this some white. Okay, so now I have 2 different columns here. And while we could probably do this math in our head, 6.5 plus 5.5 equals, okay, 7 plus 12. Okay, great. It's a whole lot easier if instead of having to make people guess, I just add a 3rd column here that's kind of that ghost box, and then put in my chart design, a data label inside the base. Boom. There's no guessing. The total is now 12. Because in my Excel over here, I just summed up my 2 series, series 1, series 2, and then put that in the base of the box above. But there's no data label option natively in Excel to automatically sum all of your data points and then throw it on top of your column. It just doesn't exist.
Thank you.
I have a question. How might we change the sort of aspect ratio or of the columns?
What do you mean by that?
If we wanted to like fill the chart with the blue and the teal columns, let's say, as opposed to having them sort of small and low down.
Oh, absolutely. So all we're doing there is we're going to change the, and we're getting to that, changing the y-axis. So if I were to add the axis, there it is, primary vertical, we'll see that this one goes up to 50. And if I were to add it to the one on the right, axis, primary vertical, it goes up to 10. So if I click into this primary vertical on the old one here and just make it on my right, you notice when I click on this, I have this format axis box pop up and I say maximum of 10 instead of 50. There we go.
Got it. Thank you.
Looks identical. So it's all about change that. We just hadn't gotten there yet, but it's the natural question. So I'm going to delete out those axes again. Last thing I want to impart to you on charts before we move on, aware that we're a little bit behind on time, but that's okay. Good questions, very valuable stuff here. Is the changing the gap width. So if you click on a column, and this is the same if you're doing row chart instead of column chart, you'll have this thing over here called gap width. And when you drag it and make it bigger or smaller, notice that it changes the width on the gap. I always like to have very large or very small number, gap width being small, like 25% or something. To me, this looks a whole lot better than this. This just looks like it has a little bit too much negative space in there. The bars are a bit small. This feels more grounded and, you know, easier to read and see, especially if someone is hard of seeing, or if your numbers get big instead of 5.5. If this was like 255, 255 just wouldn't fit in this column. It'd be too big of a number. We'd have to change the font size. So you can change your gap width in order to have more color there for the number to be over. Any questions on the charts?
I had one last question. So how do I get the chart to be the same size as the one on the right?
Anytime you want to change any object, shape, chart, picture, you name it. If you click on it and click on format, you're going to see a size box pop up, 2.76 by 4.25. I can click on the one that I wanted to change to it, so my new one, and then I can just type in manually the numbers right here. Different firms will actually have macros that will do this automatically, but this is how you do it natively in Excel. In PowerPoint.
How did you get the gap width? Sorry, I missed that.
If you click on a column, it's going to naturally pop up there. Let's go back to Home tab. So when I click on the columns here, it automatically pops up on the right here where it says gap width, and then you can just put in whatever you want. But it's under the format data series. So that's in here somewhere if it didn't pop up, depending on what version of PowerPoint you have.
I've got it up. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm going to move on to the last thing I want to talk about on the Insert tab, and that's text boxes, because text boxes are a quite useful way to organize data and keep it nice and aligned. So on slide 10 here, I'll say Insert. Then I'm going to come up here under Text, and I have this thing saying Text Box. And please, 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 I'm only talking about a few things on the Insert tab here, the things that are the most useful, most used. That doesn't mean that everything else here is useless. Headers and footers, helpful. Smart art can be helpful, but is overused. Shapes, obviously helpful. But we have to spend our time and focus on particular things, so that's what I'm talking about now. So text box, if you have an older version of PowerPoint, it'll look like this right here. New version of PowerPoint looks like this, just depends on your version. And you can click and drag to insert a text box. Now, as you put text in here, and I'm just typing in text, the nice thing about a text box is that it keeps it organized and it always shapes to the height of the text that you type in. So if I type in additional text, the text box expands, and if I delete out text, it shrinks. This is in stark contrast to this shape right here. Here, if I type in text and I hit enter and keep going, the text will expand beyond the border of the box. It's not going to resize. So depending on what your use case is, text boxes will automatically resize, as we see on the screen. Shapes do not, and both are useful in different scenarios. Inside the text box, I could come to my Home tab and I could put in bullet points, so my text could be standardized. I can format things, and then I can click and drag around the text box wherever I want it to be. Questions on text boxes? Okay, I'm going to move on down to the Design tab. And we're going to speed through a few tabs here because there's not a lot to talk about them. The Design tab is how you can change how things feel. For professional presentations, you are never, ever, ever going to use one of these standard PowerPoint themes. This is something that people use in school, something that people use for the neighborhood bake sale, for whatever. Not what you're going to use in a professional presentation. So don't even worry about these. The only one that you're actually going to end up using is the one at the very top. So if I click the drop down, the one at the very top is what's being governed by your slide master. And that's going to be pre-programmed in on PowerPoint on your work computer. So that when you open up PowerPoint, it's already going to have whatever company you're working for, their design built in there. And I'm going to show you in a second here how we can actually do that. Oh, one other thing that I want to talk about here, slide size. So on the far right, there's a thing called slide size. Traditional slides were built on 4:3. Presentations are very much going to 16:9, the wide aspect ratio. So I just made it to wide aspect ratio, but notice how my slide immediately became distorted because it was originally built on a 4:3. So if you get a presentation that's built on one or the other, know that this is how you can adjust the slide sizes in order to fit on widescreen. In general, 16:9 presentations would be used for live, because then you will avoid, when I present it, you'll avoid the black bars. So this is 16:9 when I viewed live. When I go back to 4:3 and I go live, I get the black bars down the side of my presentation. So it just depends on whether you're doing something for printing or for live presentation. Speaking of live presentation, these would be tabs like the transition tabs or the animation tabs. We're not going to talk about these today. They are not used hardly at all. They're just made for presentation. Honestly, if you are wanting to do a lot of live presentations where you are talking to large crowds in front of a projector screen or something, PowerPoint generally isn't the most impressive tool to do that in. I think Prezi is a much better tool, and what most people who are doing that are using, not PowerPoint. PowerPoint is mainly used for printing materials, not for presenting them in front of large groups, which is interesting because it's not how it was originally designed, but definitely how it has evolved. The review tab, moving on down, I told you these tabs we get to go through quite quickly, have a few useful tools in here. First is spelling. For those of you who suffer from not having the correct spelling gene, I feel your pain. The button here can help you with that. There's a comments button. In actuality, I've never seen a senior banker, or no matter what the role is, a senior employee use these. Typically what they'll do is they'll print them off and write with a red pen, or they'll have this packaged together as a PDF and then mark it up on a tablet as a PDF and send it back. I've never actually seen someone do comments in here, but this is how you could do it if you wanted to. And finally, compare, where you can compare multiple versions of a PowerPoint presentation to see what has changed. The same way as you can do red lines in Word or in a PDF to see what the differences are between presentations. Any questions there before we move on? So now we're getting to some interesting stuff again, moving through those middle tabs that don't get touched a whole lot. And that's the View tab. So click on View. And on the left, under Master Views, there is a button called Slide Master. Go ahead and click on that, and it's going to pop out this slide right here. And let's talk about how this is organized. So a slide master is what governs everything about how a presentation looks. On the left-hand side here, we have parent slides and we have children slides. So the big one here is the parent slide. This parent slide controls these 3 children. So on the parent slide, if I come in here and let's say I insert a shape and I put in here a star, on all of my children, there is now that star on every single one. So anything that I do on one will be on all. So what will people frequently do? Maybe they'll put their company logo. So maybe your logo, they'll put it down here on the bottom left and put in a little text box maybe that says Star Advisory LLC. Right, and we could align that. And then on every single one of my slides now, I have Star Advisory LLC on the bottom left-hand corner. So that's one of the uses for a slide master. Another thing that we'll frequently see in presentations is if you're making a presentation on behalf of a company, so you're advising a company on a buy side, a sell side, whatever, you're not going to use your firm's slide master, which has your firm's styles and font sizes and shapes and all that, colors. You want to use the firm's or the client's instead of yours. So you have to build a slide master from scratch if they don't have one, which is frequently the case for companies that are worth less than about $2 billion or so. Once you get to bigger companies, they'll actually have their own built and they can share it with you, but smaller companies frequently will not. And so what you'll do is you'll come into the slide master and you'll add little squares on the side. And what people will do is they'll take the square, and then in the square, they will put in all of the colors that govern the company. So I could come in here and I can say shape fill and click on more fill colors. And this little box is going to pop up and I can see that this color's definition is 0, 124, 146. RGB value is what's this called. 0, 124, 146. I did that by clicking on the box, shape fill, more fill colors, and here's how I can identify the color, right? 0, 124, 146. So then right here, I'll write 0, 124, 146. I'll put this on the side of the presentation. And if I close out of my master view, on every single slide in my presentation, I now have this box over here on the left that will not be printed because it's not in the white space, but it tells me what the company's colors are. So if I'm wanting to insert something later on, or I want to do whatever, and I need to change it to one of the company's colors instead of just a random default color, hey, there I go. I could insert a arrow and I could change the fill to what color? Oh, 0, 124, 146. Boom, hit OK, and I'm done. So this is one of the frequent things that you'll see done on the Slide Master. Now, what you cannot do, let's say that you have an internship at JP Morgan, full-time position at JP Morgan, whatever. Do not, under any circumstances, go into JP Morgan Slide Master in the presentation that you have and start adjusting things. It is already preset to have all of the different styles that are firm approved. So Slide Master is something you're going to do when you are building a presentation from scratch on behalf of a company, not messing with your firm Slide Master. That will get you into trouble. When you do a Slide Master, last thing I want to talk about here is that you can adjust the colors. So this is how I built in the color schemes. So PWS, Pillars of Wall Street, I can come in here and I can customize the colors. And when you customize the colors, here's all of our colors. Then whenever I insert something, let's say I insert a shape again, it gives me those colors on the shape styles. That's how they're already pre-formatted in order to be our colors. So I don't have to recolor it every single time. I just build it into the Slide Master and I'm good to go. And that's under Slide Master, colors.
What do you have, bro?
The rooms, the graduate side.
Yeah, we're literally here. Step outside.
Can you help me unmute him, please?
It's probably one of the rooms down. It's right. It's the room. Yeah.
Sorry,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, I got him muted. There we go.
Thank you, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, any questions on Slide Master?
How did you open the Slide Master tab?
If you click on, I'm going to close Master View, click on View, and then click on Slide Master. For me, it's the 5th one from the, or 6th one from the left, but it might be different on yours.
I see it. Thank
Yep, and then to exit Slide Master, on the Slide Master tab, which appeared there on the far left, over here on the far right is Close Master View, and it goes away, and you're back in the presentation now.
This is a little bit unrelated, but how did you get the text box in that teal square to stick with the square?
Oh, it's not a text box. It's just text written in the shape itself. So if I come up here to my parent, it's just written in the text.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. But what you were talking about is grouping, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, because sometimes you do want there to be a text box in a shape.
Which tab had the more colors option?
It's it's not just one tab, but anything that you're doing that you're going to be coloring. So if I insert a shape, I can come to shape format and I can do shape fill and do more fill colors, shape outline, more outline colors. For font, if I click on the font and come to home, I can hide my font here with more colors. So anytime you have colors, below them is the more colors option.
Thank you.
And then also there you'll see the eyedropper option, which we didn't talk about, but is helpful because if I already know that this is the color I want, there I go. I can just grab it.
How did you align the star next to when you did star all capital?
We're going to be talking about that here in 1 second on the format tab. You'll see over here. We're doing that right over in here. But yes, that's the natural question that when I do something, you're like, how did he do that? I just didn't want to talk about it right at that moment, but we're going to be talking about it here soon. It's very helpful. Okay, a few other things on the view tab here. There's different views that you can have. I'll say that normal is how I always live. Some people do like the outline view over here because they can see more slides. I find it much more helpful to actually see what's on them, but if you want to change between your views, there it is. Some people like having rulers and grid lines and guides and all that. I always found it not helpful for me. That doesn't mean that I'm right and someone else is wrong. It's just a preference thing, really. I like just going with a clean white space and not having all of these guides or grid lines. Other people like to see them. Last thing is color or grayscale. A lot of times when you print a presentation for a client, you're going to hit print and it's going to go to some print room where, fun thing if you weren't aware, most firms do not do their own printing. They actually contract with a third party that has office space inside their building that handles all the printing. So whenever you print something in color from the print room, you actually have to buy it. And they get charged. So when you send stuff to the print room, you have to attach like a job code and you have to pay for it and blah, blah, blah. So a lot of times what'll happen is you'll print a few in color and then you'll do a bunch of what are just called black and whites. So let's say you're doing a presentation and there's going to be 5 people in the meeting. Well, you print 7 in color just in case someone else shows up that's important that needs a color version and nice and bound. And then maybe you print 5 black and whites and throw them in your bag so that if a bunch more people show up, you have something for them to look at without having printed a bunch of color presentations. Well, a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll just hit Control P, come down to print, and instead of doing color, they'll do grayscale, pure black and white, whatever, and go. The problem is, for whatever reason, PowerPoint prints it differently when you do that compared to coming to view and hitting grayscale. That when you come to hit grayscale on the view tab and then hit print, it shows up a lot better when it prints than when you just say print in black and white. I don't know why this is. I was taught this about 1.5 years into my banking career, and I never looked back. Things were sharper. It looked better. If I'm just printing off a page for me to do a markup internally, you know, with analyst and associate, we're just sitting down going through something, I don't worry about it. But if I'm going to be printing and bringing it to a meeting as backup presentations, I'll always go here to view first and then make it grayscale before I print it so that it looks a little bit sharper and nicer. Questions? Okay, we're going to come on down to the Format tab. So as we saw earlier, the Format tab appears when you select an object. So I'll come here and I'll select this header and you'll see that Picture Format appears. Lots of different things that we can do with the Format tab, such as filling objects. We can change the order of objects. We can align them, rotate them, resize. Basically anything that I need to do to manipulate something is going to appear on that Format tab, whether it's a table format or picture format, what have you. So let's go through some of the examples of things that we can do, which some of you have already asked about. So one of them is we can change the size, which we've already done. So this should be a little bit familiar. I'll get an arrow and I'm going to come to the Home tab and select arrow. You could also go to Insert, Shape, and come down and get the arrow, either way. Home arrow. And I'm going to insert the arrow. If you hold down Shift, it's going to automatically keep the arrow proportions the same. Arrows are one of those things where proportions don't matter as much, so I'm not going to hold down Shift. I'm going to take it about right there. So my arrow here is 2 high by 2.83 wide. So I'll click into my new one and say 2 by 2.83. To type that quickly, for those of you saying, how did he do it so quickly? I click into my arrow, Shape, Format on the right, and I start by selecting the height. So I click on it, it highlights all of it, and I type in 2. And then if you press Tab, it'll automatically jump down to the width and select it all. And I forget what my number was here. So I'm going to guess. I know I'm wrong. I'm wrong. I'm off by 0.3. So using the Tab button just makes that a little bit easier. So that's how we can change the sizes. That should be review. Any questions on that? Okay. Someone gave earlier, who was it? It was Charles. Talks about a tool that did not exist when I started on Wall Street, but something called Logo Intern, which you can grab logos off the web, which are great. A lot of firms will also have pre-formatted logos on their internal drive, which you can grab from. But invariably, you are going to need to, at some point, go to Google, grab an image and put it into your presentation, whether it's a logo or whether it's just an image of something or a picture. One time we were pitching a water company. So the company, literally their entire business was going around to all the office buildings and replacing all of the water coolers in the break rooms. And they were a $1 billion business that did this. And as soon as I pitched the company, I saw their trucks everywhere. But it's one of the coolest things about investment banking is you learn about all these businesses, which of course they exist, but you never thought about them until you worked with them. But I wanted to add a little touch to the presentation. So instead of just doing a normal presentation, on one of the slides, I put in a little water tap on the side. And so the little water tap had water spilling out of it. And then I made the water kind of cascade down, and it was the bullet points of the water cascading down a little waterfall type thing. So it just looked nice and sharp. But the image that I found had a nasty background in it. So how do you remove those backgrounds to just keep what you want? Well, first is you could use Photoshop, or you could use GIMP if you don't have Photoshop. In reality, most people on this probably have never opened Photoshop or GIMP before, have no clue how to use those tools, and it's not going to be on your work computer. So how do we do it on a basic remove a background in PowerPoint? Open up your files again and grab this NBC logo and click and drag it into PowerPoint. And it's massive. But let's notice the difference. I'm going to drag it off the screen here so that we have some room to work with. When I have the pre-formatted one here and I click and I drag it over something, notice that you can read the text inside that little peacock, which I did not know that this was a peacock for way too long, like 25, 30 years something. And someone pointed out, and now everyone knows because they have the Peacock Network channel, but let's be honest, I should have known that this was a peacock. It just never occurred to me. Someone pointed it out, and it's like FedEx. The first time that someone tells you that FedEx has the arrow that's pointing to the right in their logo, you can't help but see the arrow every single time you look at that truck. Same thing with the peacock. Anyway, I can read the text through it, but on this new one, when I drag it, it's white. So the exercise here is, how do we remove that white and turn it into transparent? Well, first I am going to resize this logo. So my old one here is 2.63 by 2.67. So for the height, I'll say 2.63, and the width automatically went to 2.67 to keep the aspect ratio the same. Now I want to remove that white. So what I'm going to do is I am going to click on color. You'd think remove background. No. You click on color on the picture format tab. So check out my screen. And because I'm zoomed in so much, I have to scroll down, but come all the way down to set transparent color. Click on that. How does the set transparent color tool work? It allows you to select one color that anything that matches the RGB value, so red, green, and blue, anything that matches that RGB value in the image that you have selected, it'll make transparent. So in this case, I want to remove the white. So I'll click on the peacock and the white area where the little pencil is going, and it removed all of that white background. And it's now the same as the other. I'm going to hit undo, because let me show you what happens if you try and remove something that doesn't have that same color. So let's say I try and remove the blue. See how the little blue outline there? I'm going to zoom in, hold down Control and wheel in. See how there's still that border? Well, that's because when you make an image, you don't just have the color and then immediately not the color. There's a little bit of a blur that happens when the image is coded right there on the border. So when you remove a color using this set transparent tool, it doesn't really turn out all that well. It works great for white, not so much for any other color. But the reality is the majority of the time, you're going to want to remove white. So that's a very, very, very handy tool to use. I've used it tens of thousands of times. Questions there?
Yes, I have a question. In a situation where, let's say the background of the deck is not white, and let's say for example it's blue, and the image that we're trying to put on our screen has some variation of blue, would we then use remove background versus the transparency function?
It really just depends. And that's not a satisfying answer, but I don't know how to give you a different one. The end goal is to always make it look sharp and professional. The majority of the time, that means that backgrounds will be white. So it's not a case that you run into a lot for professional presentations, but it does happen where you're trying to put colors together. And really, it just depends on the situation, because the remove background tool I found is pretty clunky. And what you do here is you can mark areas that you want to keep and areas that you want to remove, and it'll try and remove stuff. But I don't think that it does a very good job at all. So personally, when I run into something like that, I open up Photoshop and I make the image that I need to. If I'm I didn't do that when I worked on the street, then what I would do is I would just put it in a container. So I'll delete the text here, and I would just make NBC in this little container with the border. And I would just group these together. So now if I move NBC, it just has this little box around it, and this would just be on top of the blue. And I promise I'll show you how to do groups here in a second.
I have a quick follow-up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have used the background removal, and it definitely is very tedious sometimes, especially when there's a lot of colors. My question is, I was in reference to the presentation you did for the water company, how you were a bit creative.
Yeah.
So when we're doing our internships this summer, most of us probably will be doing some like end of internship presentation. Is it okay to show creativity as long as it's related to the business?
That is an amazingly good question. And the answer is yes, if it's done tactfully and tastefully. And I'm going to tell you, because you brought it up, a very embarrassing story from my internship where I tried to show creativity in a presentation and I just fell completely on my face. I was tasked with putting together a bull case and a bear case for a particular company and then put them together on slides. So I thought it would be great if I got the Wall Street bear and the Wall Street bull and put it up in the title. I had the little bear here, the charging bear that you see, and charging bull. And it was a silhouetted one. I was like, oh, this looks so cool. And then I put all the content in the slide that I needed to and handed it to the VP. And he looked at it and looked at me, burst out laughing, and started handing the slides around to people. And within minutes, dozens of people had seen these bears and bull slides, which I thought was really sharp when I first did it, and then realized it's just not done, that people don't do that kind of thing. And it just ended up looking silly to everyone who'd been making slides for years and years and years and years. And there's just a codified, what's the word I'm looking for? There's just rules of the road that everyone follows for how all of these presentations look in the banking and finance world. It's not a startup. It's not the creativity deck or something. So you'll hear in reference to lots of things, before you break the rules, master all the rules. Before, when you're baking, before you say, oh, that's about a teaspoon in my hand, measure a teaspoon 10,000 times so that you know what a teaspoon feels like. That's my advice to you this summer. Don't try and go outside the lines, because you're going to end up probably in the situation that I was, where you're like, this is really cool, and they don't share your opinion that it's really cool. So helpful, not that's my honest opinion.
Thank you for that. That was a funny story.
Yeah, funny now, not funny then. Nightmare still. It's been 10 years and I still remember it, right? Okay. So I'm going to come down to alignment, because this is terribly helpful. Someone's already asked about it. Alignment allows us to pull things together quickly, keep boxes lined up professionally, sharp edges. Some people who are new will do one of these numbers and they'll drag, and you see the little red lines appearing on my screen until they think it lines up. Okay, that's good. Or even worse, maybe they just kind of wing it and they're like, oh, that's about right there. And hopefully you can see that this bottom one is lower than the ones on the side. It just ends up looking like junk. So I'll press Control Z a few times to undo. To align things and make them look crisp and correct, first, select everything that you want to align. So I'll click on the bottom, or the far left one. I got the cursor blinking, which means I need to press Escape so that I just select the box, and then hold down Control to grab all of the boxes that I want to have aligned together. Now, after I have all three, I'm going to go to Shape Format, I'm going to click on align. And this is how I can align things. So I can align to the top. If you click align top, they're all going to align to the top of the tallest box in the presentation, which is the one on the right. If I did bottom, it would align to the one in the middle because it's on the bottom. If I did middle, it's going to find the average point on the screen and then align to them. So like there's middle. Or I could do top and they all align to the top. Or I could do bottom and they all align to the bottom. Just so, notice how the one in the middle is a little bit further to the right than the other one. And if you can't see these things, after your internship, you're going to immediately be able to start seeing these things. After you've worked for a year or two, it's just going to, it'll be painful when you see slides like this. So I'm going to select all three of these again, and I'm going to click align. And I can distribute something horizontally or vertically. So in this case, I'm going to distribute horizontally in order to have the space on the left of this middle box and the space on the right of this middle box exactly the same. Not close, exactly the same. Then I can align top. And now I have three boxes that are aligned top that are evenly spaced between each other. If you've never seen that before, I've just changed your PowerPoint life. You're welcome.
How did you select all three boxes? Sorry, I can't just do it right now.
Yeah, no problem. Hold down Control and click. Additional questions?
Thank you. Thank you for the tip.
Oh, something came up in the chat box.
How do you get the align?
When you select, when you select any object, you're going to have shape format appear. And then on the top right under align here, or under arrange, excuse me, the arrange bucket, align for me is in the top right of it. It might be in a different position depending on how your PowerPoint looks, but it's right there. And here's all of your align options.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So I don't want you doing these numbers where you're dragging around waiting to see those red suggestion things appearing anymore. That's just a recipe to make mistakes. Instead, I want you to use these alignment tools. In fact, what people will do in presentations so that things line up is they'll actually insert shapes like this. Insert shape square. Have a square. Give it 0 fill. No outline. And so there's actually a shape here, but no one can see it and it won't print. And they'll have these ghost shapes in their presentation in order to have everything aligned to it. And so they might even put it on the slide master so that if I'm doing something over and over and over again, for example, a profile slide. So whenever you're trying to pitch a company on potential buyers, you'll have a whole bunch of slides called profile slides. And you might have 20, 30, 40 slides, which have profiles of all of these buyers. Or conversely, you could have profile slides of potential people you could sell to. And what you'll do is you'll want everything to look exactly the same. So you might just make a slide master slide for just strip profiles. And you can put in these boxes that are these little ghost boxes that appear here, but I can align things to them. So if I select it, and then I select one of these boxes or these boxes on the side and I hit align top, they're all going to align to the top of that ghost box. So you see those all the time in presentations, but of course no one would ever know because they don't print.
I still have a question. Sorry.
Yeah,
I'm still struggling to select all three boxes at once.
Yep. So I don't have anything selected here. So select any object on the screen.
Okay.
If your mouse looks like my mouse looks right now, where it has the little compass and the mouse, all you have to do is click once and it'll have the box selected. If you select to the middle of it and it has the cursor like mine has right now, it's going to blink the cursor and then you have to press escape so that it goes out to the selection tool instead of the edit tool. After you have the box selected, as mine is now, just hold down Control and then left click on everything you want to select.
I still wasn't able to do it.
That's how you do it. So
Okay,
I
I'll
hear
try
you using
again.
a trackpad. It might be that you're right clicking accidentally.
Okay.
Or it might be that you have the cursor blinking. If the cursor is blinking, you can't have the cursor blinking to do it. Then
Okay,
it's
got it.
not going to work. It's just going to go from one to the other.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, are you on a Mac? That's a good point, Sophia.
Yeah, I'm on a Mac.
Got it. Use your command key instead of your control key on a Mac.
Oh, got it. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, we're going to move on to the Format tab for rotate and compressing images. This is slide 25. One of the dangers of dropping images into your presentation is that your presentation can get large quickly. And corporate email servers usually are somewhere between 8, 10, 12 megabyte maximum email size. So a presentation can easily go through 100, 200 versions before it ever gets printed. And each version, you'll name it like PWS PowerPoint Fundamentals V01, V02, V03. As you start working on it, you continuously update so that if something goes wrong, you have lots of versions that you can refer to. Great and helpful, unless you just saved 10 gigabytes of presentation down because you have such big images. So how do we deal with these kind of things? Well, first thing we're going to talk about is how to insert and rotate an image, and then we're going to talk about how to compress it. So let's go back to our asset folder. And I'm going to grab the flipped Nokia logo here and drop it in. And notice that my little Android and Nokia here is flipped. It's backwards. So I want to flip it. On the picture format tab, I can come up here to rotate. This is under the arrange bucket. And I'm going to click flip horizontal. And boom, there we are. Now it's flipped and it's legible. Then I can come up here to compress pictures and click on that. And it's going to pop up this box right here. And I can compress lots of pictures. I can compress just this picture. I can choose how much I want to compress it. If you've cropped the image, which we'll be talking about here on the next slide, you can delete the cropped area of the picture. What this does is it compresses the images down in your presentation and can turn a presentation from megabytes down to low-level kilobytes very quickly. So it's one of the most common problems that people have emailing IT is that presentation won't open, or it got big, or how do I fix this, or what's going on? And usually the problem has to do with images, and it has to do with them being too big, causing problems. So if you're dropping in an image that you went to Google and pulled some logo, and that logo is just massive. Like when I made the Pillars logo recently, I made it 25 inches wide, which is enormous, but I made it really high resolution so that I can use it for all sorts of different purposes. If I'm just putting it into a little PowerPoint presentation, I don't want a 15 megabyte image. So I can compress it down and make it really small and crop out what I don't need. Questions there?
Should images be compressed? Should all images be compressed in the PowerPoint?
It depends on what's going on, but you could certainly compress all images, or you could just do the single image, depends on what the use case is.
And one more thing, would we use the default, I guess, on the resolution, or will we click email if we plan to send this via email?
It obviously, the more pixels per inch PPI that you have, the bigger the image is. So I usually just leave it on use default resolution. But if you are having issues where you want to make it a higher quality or a lower quality or what have you, you could, there's lots of options here for you to be able to select. So my default, what I'll do, delete cropped areas of the picture, use default. That's my first pass, and that, works. Good questions. Let's talk about how to crop, because this is neat. So once again, we're going to insert something. So inserting Samsung Mobile here. There's times where you're trying to find maybe a logo or something, and you can't find the company logo Samsung. You just find some subsidiary like Samsung Mobile. You're like, no big deal. I can delete out the part of the logo that I don't want. So I'll grab the Samsung Mobile. Man, I need to drink some water. My jaw is getting tight. And under picture format in the top right, I have the crop tool. So I'm going to click on crop. and you'll see that it pops out these big black boxes. So first thing, when I'm doing cropping, I like to zoom in because it's really difficult because those big black boxes to show the borders are so hard to see. So I'm going to use my wheel on my mouse, hold down Control, and then wheel in. You could also on the bottom right of your screen use this little slider bar in order to zoom out, zoom in. However you want to zoom is just fine. Now it's a little bit easier to see. So when I crop, I can come down here. I'm going to do the bottom right. And when I go, notice that it's jumping. So as I go up with my mouse, and you can see it on your screen as well if you do this, it kind of jumps. And what it's doing is it's jumping based on these grid lines. I don't show a lot of them on my screen. They don't really appear very easily, but you can see right here in the M and mobile, all those little gray dots, it's jumping from dot to dot to dot. And that's just the standard thing that it does, which sometimes is good and sometimes is bad. Sometimes we want it to do this, and we want it to be nice and smooth. I feel like there's a Old Spice commercial in there somewhere, nice and smooth. In order to make it nice and smooth and not jump from grid line to grid line, as you're cropping, just hold down the Alt key. So hold down Alt, go up or down, and it's going to be nice and smooth and continuous instead of jumping from dot to dot to dot to dot. So I'm going to get it nice and close up there on Samsung. And then I'm going to hit enter or click out of it, and it's gone. When I zoom out, it now is just the company Samsung instead of being Samsung Mobile. Questions on how we cropped there?
Can you repeat that, please?
Yep, I'll hit undo, Control C to undo. Here's the whole image. I'll zoom in, click on the image, picture format, and click on crop. Then I can just drag the crop up until it's where I want it to be. There's too much white space here. This way I'm cutting off letters, so I'll use the Alt key in order to make it a continuous crop. And I'll crop kind of right below that bottom letter, and then click outside the image in order to save it. But if I click on it, notice that it's still there. Like I didn't delete it. See how even though it's cropped here, I can still see mobile there kind of shaded. That's telling me it's gone. If I want to delete it and I want it to be gone, compress the image, delete cropped areas of pictures. That's going to save the space and delete all that junk.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I'll zoom out.
The background is still associated with the original image, right?
The white?
Yes.
You mean? Yes, absolutely. And because this is a low quality image, as you see how much pixelation there is, using the background color tool here isn't going to do a whole lot. See, I still see it in there. I mean, it does some, but there's still the fuzzy. So it actually did a lot better than I thought it would, but you can see all these artifacts. Look over here on the S. See how it has the white blocking out some of these letters? When you have these low quality images, it's going to have all of those junky artifacts in there. So part of that lesson is get a higher quality image, but I did this one on purpose. Also, you could use that site that was suggested, or when you're searching for logos in particular, always type in quotations, quote.png quotation, and that's going to give you an image with a transparent background. And Google actually even has an option to search for transparent images as well. Additional questions? Okay, let's talk about how we group things. So when I come over here, I have Starbucks, Pepsi, and Coca-Cola's logo, and all of them are grouped so that I can treat them as one object. And if I want to have a whole bunch of objects or a bunch of logos on the screen, maybe like a 5x5 grid of logos or something like that, and then I want to start writing text, once I align them and make them nice and pretty, I probably want to group them so that if I move one, I move all of them and don't have to realign it every single time. So how do we do that? Well, let's drop the logos in. So Starbucks logo, Pepsi logo, and Coca-Cola logo. Drop them all in here. I need to resize these logos. Oh, I have Coca-Cola twice. So I am going to select all of them. And as a start, I'm going to, after I selected all three, you see I have Pepsi, Starbucks, and Coke. I'm going to hold down Control so that as I go in and out on the corner, they maintain the aspect ratio. So I'm just going to get them a little bit smaller. Now, I'm going to want to end up aligning these in the middle, but see how the Starbucks logo is cropped very tightly. It's right on the borders. But the Coca-Cola one is not cropped at all, and the Pepsi's somewhere in the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and crop all of these so that they're nice and tight. So practice the cropping, just how we did on the last one. I'm cropping Coca-Cola now. I'm holding down Alt as I move this in so that I can get it nice and close. I'm going to do the same thing for Pepsi, crop, and I'll crop that nice and close. Recall, we're doing this so that when we align it, instead of aligning to white space, which won't make any sense at all, we're going to be aligning to the actual logo itself. So I have my 3 cropped images here now using the crop and using the Alt key. Now I want to get approximately the same height as my logos down here. So if I click into the group, it selects all of them. And if I click on a logo another time, I'll select the image inside the group. So if you look at my screen, you'll see that I have the image selected and the group. I did that by first selecting the group, then selecting the image. And I see that Starbucks is 0.77 tall. So I can change that to 0.77. Hit enter. Coca-Cola is 1.47 wide, so I'll do that. 1.47. And Pepsi is 0.94 tall. And I'm going to do 0.94. And then I want to point something out. Look at how even though I grabbed those same numbers, the sizes are different. Why is that? The answer is because I cropped them. That these in here are not cropped the exact same way as the cropping that I just did. They're not cropped quite as neatly as what I just did. So when I rearrange or resize it, it's resizing, including the white space. So sometimes you can't just grab the number if the images aren't truly the same. But that's okay. We don't need it to be identical in this particular case. In fact, the ones that I just did right now look a whole lot better because this Starbucks is 0.77 by 0.77. This Starbucks, woo, that's 0.87. That Coca-Cola looks like the aspect ratio is off as well. See, when I click on the format picture button, 25% by 28% on the scale, meaning my aspect ratio is not locked. The Coca-Cola logo is stretched. No bueno. Same thing with Starbucks. Although it says 100%, 100%, it still looks stretched to me. So I think it was modified at some point. Okay, so now I am going to align all of these logos. So I'm going to pull them away from these others up here in the white space. Having all 3 selected, I'll click align, and I want to align middle. And then I'm going to distribute horizontally so that we have nice even spacing. And that looks good. Just because you align something and distribute it horizontally, sometimes the spacing will still be a little bit off. Like these down here on the bottom are distributed evenly, but see how there's less white space to the left of Pepsi compared to Coke? That's just because there's so much white space in the Pepsi logo and in the Coca-Cola logo. So sometimes the mathematical distribute horizontally for an image doesn't pass the eye test, in which case I would need to come in here to Pepsi and maybe just press the right arrow a few times or something in order to move it just a little bit to the right, just a little bit to the left. But in this case, I think it actually looks pretty good. So I'm going to align and distribute horizontally. Now to group, I'll click the picture format, and up here on the top I have group, and I can select group. You can also just hit Control G groups. And now I can move this around as a group. So that was a lot right there. So any questions on what we just did? inserting, cropping, aligning, or grouping objects. We good?
Quick question. If you were doing everything as you're following, and would cropping affect like if a picture looks like compressed or stretched? Would that be a reason why like my Coca-Cola logo just looks like really weird?
If you cropped it, the answer is always yes, it could, but I'm trying to figure out how yours would have happened. If you leave the aspect ratio locked, and whenever you do adjustments to something, you always hold down Control so that you're maintaining the aspect ratio, it shouldn't stretch anyway. So what happened to you probably, and I'm guessing here, but probably, is when you clicked on the Coca-Cola image or whatever it was, and picture format, and you typed in the number, your lock aspect ratio button was not selected. So that when you change a number, watch what happens when I change the height here. The width remains constant. Probably wasn't related to the cropping. I don't know that for sure, but this is the most likely case of what happened.
Thank you.
Okay, let's talk about bringing objects forward or backward. And this is helpful to be able to layer one image on top of another in order to kind of set a scene or build something, maybe have text in front of an image. So maybe I'd have this Pepsi logo on the screen, but I wanted it to be kind of in the background. So I can send it to back and then it's behind my text. I could even change the transparency on it in order to make it more fade into the background. So let's talk about how we do that. First, we're going to insert some images. So come into your backup and click on Pepsi Red and Pepsi Without Red and drag them into the presentation. And notice that these are actually two different images. Now, depending on what order you drop them in, it might be that the Pepsi Without Red is in front of your red, meaning that it doesn't actually look like the Pepsi logo. It just looks like a little blue whale or something. So you need to adjust the layers in order to make sure that the Pepsi logo looks correct. So different ways you can do this. I think the easiest way is to actually just right click on the image and click send back or send front. You can actually send it backwards one at a time, or you can send all the way to the back. Usually sending it all the way to the back or all the way to the front is sufficient. Having done that, to align our images and build the Pepsi logo, I'm going to select the red and select the blue one, and then use my alignment tools. I want to align center, and I want to align middle. And that'll bring these nice together into the Pepsi logo. And then I'll hit Control G to group these as a single Pepsi logo. And holding down Control, I can resize it down to fit into the box. As a reminder, this presentation is being recorded. So if I'm moving just a little bit too fast for you or a little bit too slow for you, you can always go back to the recording and play it at your leisure for whatever speed is most appropriate for you. Questions on bringing something forward or sending it backward? Okay, I want to show you how to set the transparency on something. So I'm going to insert a new slide here. And I'll just put title and content and then delete out this holder. So let's say I wanted to have a logo in the background. Let's do the NBC logo. And this is just a bit much for me. It's pretty loud. Like any text that I put on top of that's going to be rough. So on the picture, by rough, I mean illegible. On the picture format, I can click transparency and you can actually go through here and send something pretty light. Or you can click on the manual one at the bottom, picture transparency options, and you have a slider where you can take it as transparent or not as you actually want. Helpful thing, I play with transparency all the time in order to get the kind of effects that I want for a slide. Where can we find the recording? Not a question for me. I do not know. I know that they get recorded and I know that they get posted, but I'm going to let SEO answer that one.
Yeah, I can handle that one.
Yeah.
It'll be in Blackboard when it's ready. It'll be uploaded to the course.
There we go.
And we'll make an announcement so you'll know when it's been uploaded.
Perfect.
I have a question.
Yeah, shoot.
Would we apply the same method if we wanted to have like confidential in the background?
A confidential in background, you would put it in the slide master. So I would go into view slide master and I would go right here on my slide master. Let's say I wanted it on all of my content slides and I'd say insert text box and I'd put it right in the middle and I'd say confidential and I would make it red or something. And then I'd put it, center and align center, align middle, or maybe I want it stamped on the bottom, or typically what you'll see is people will put them on the top right or something. If you want it to be really big, okay, fine, which I think is what you were suggesting. We can make it huge. Woo. Made it too big there, didn't I? And then I never set text transparent. So there's some effect in here where you can set the text transparent and I forget where it is because I never do this. Usually for confidential stamps or whatever, I'll put them on the top right. But yes, the idea is exactly the same. I forget exactly where that button is, but it's in here somewhere. Although now it's going to bother me, right? Format shape, it has to be in there. Transparency, there it is. Oh, that's dropping the shadow of it. That's the shadow transparency. Here it is. There's the actual transparency. Confidential. So yes, same idea. Just throw it in the slide master. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, I want to make sure we have time for general questions and this last thing. So I'm going to jump to the quick access toolbar here. Pretty much time this out well. I told you at the top that shortcuts in PowerPoint are sometimes absolutely ridiculous and gave you the example of a line with Alt J D A M to align something middle. Who's going to memorize that? Not useful. Instead, what we use are the quick access toolbar. So you can come up to the top where mine is orange, yours might be a different color, and click on this drop down button right here. And you can go to more commands to customize the quick access toolbar. And this big box will appear. I'll do that one more time. Coming up to the quick access toolbar, click on the little drop down and go to more commands. And this is where you can select the commands that you use the most often. With the benefit being that if I want to group something, let's say I insert a few boxes or arrows or whatever. So I have a bunch of these arrows all over the place. And with these arrows, I want to align middle, align top, and then group them. Instead of having to click through everything, I can just select the arrows. And then if I press Alt, look at my quick access toolbar up here, numbers appear. So number 2 for me is align middle. Number 3 is align top. Number 4 is align center. Number 1 is group. So I set these because these are ones that I use frequently, but you can set up whichever ones you want. Maybe in this particular case, distribute horizontally would have been more useful. You can set up whatever you want in order to make your shortcuts happen a little bit faster. And you have obviously 1 through 10 here to be able to do it. So more commands. On the left, these are the popular commands, but you can drag it down to all commands and it'll have every single button in PowerPoint that you can add to your quick access toolbar. So feel free to take a screenshot right here of the ones that I do, but this is a highly personal thing. And honestly, I'd probably change this a little bit now based on what I'm doing more these days. In group, the shortcut key is now Control-G, so you don't really need it. But there it is. So the quick access toolbar makes your life a whole lot easier for ones that you're doing all the time. So popular ones, alignment tools, group tools, and object positioning tools, sending objects forward and sending objects backward. with that, we have about 3 minutes left in the presentation. So I'm just going to open up to general questions. If you have something that I didn't cover, maybe I know the answer, maybe I don't, we'll see. Or anything that we covered today, I'm happy to give any advice I can in the last few minutes here.
Everything was super clear. Thank you.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Actually, I just thought of a question. If I wanted to do more, I guess practice more of the master slides, since that's very common, I guess the resources that I would use, would they basically be explaining the same information? I know sometimes like when you're learning like PowerPoint or Excel and you use other resources like LinkedIn Learning, some of the training is slightly different because in banking there may be like a more prominent way of doing something versus the resources. So would that apply as far as the slide master?
It of course is going to vastly depend upon what resource you're using. And honestly, when it comes to PowerPoint, I never found PowerPoint. I mean, I designed this course to be designed towards people wanting to work in finance. These are things that you do in finance, that I found the tools out there for PowerPoint they didn't translate as well for me. It's like when you go and you take an Excel course from someone who just knows general Excel but doesn't know Excel for finance. They're teaching you stuff about Excel but doesn't necessarily apply. So that's where we as a firm try and specialize and say, we're going to teach you the things that you need when you're working in finance, when you're working in consulting. So I can't point you to another resource that I honestly think is all that great. What I would do if you're wanting to practice these is search for PowerPoint presentations online. So just put it in quotation mark .ppt, PPT, and find other presentations that are good. So search for like sell side deck, buy side deck, pitch deck, or whatever, and then recreate the presentation. PowerPoint is all about speed because it looks the looks have to be there, right? Having it be look appealing to the eye is the most critical thing. So when I say all about speed, everyone has to get to that product that looks good. It's about how fast can you get there, because people think that the majority of their job is going to be Excel or sitting down and going to meetings or blah blah blah. No. When you're a junior person, it doesn't matter what you're doing, consulting, marketing, unless you're like a barista or something, you're spending so much time in PowerPoint. So you live and die in PowerPoint, which is why this is such a helpful class. And maybe we can do part 2 of the class at some point with you guys. It's all about how fast can you do things in order to make it look good. And that's just practice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, sorry, I wanted to know if you can go back to the Pepsi example, because I was having a little trouble with the controlling the picture I sent backwards, the blue and white, and trying to group it.
Yeah, so can't undo it. So if you are, I just ungrouped it. So what you're doing here is if you have 2 of them, I'll move them out here to the side so it's easier to see. My red is in front of my white here. But if I have this in the front, my white is now in front of my red. So all you have to do is click on one of the images. Doesn't really matter which one. And then right click on it and say bring to front or send to back, depending on which one you want. So I want the red in front. So I'll click on red, right click, bring to front. And now it's in front of the other one. And to group, it's just Control G. So select both images and Control G.
Yeah, my question was like, how would you grab, like, I'm having trouble grabbing the one that's in the back, because when I click on it, it's clicking the red. And
yeah,
the
so make sure that they're not overlapping. So see how I dragged it away from the white one, and I have the red, and then I just hold down Control and select the other one.
Oh, okay.
And then to align them, then I do my alignments, and I'm now using the quick access toolbar because I've showed you how to do it. So this is why I have my quick access toolbar set up well, because I can do that really fast. Alt 2, Alt 4 for me, and it's aligned, Control G, and it's grouped. because
Perfect,
this is
thank
just one of
you.
the things you do in banking so many times. That's why I set it up in the quick access toolbar, because when you do a presentation, you may do that 500 times.
Right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
How did you make transparent the image once?
So you can, I'm going to have to undo this one because you can't make something transparent that you have multiple images grouped. You have to make each individual image transparent. So if I have the red here, come up to picture format, I can click on transparency under adjust. But if I have a grouped image like this over here, notice transparency is grayed out. So if it's grayed out for you, that's why the image is grouped. You have to first ungroup it, then click on what you want and go to transparency.
Okay, yeah, my Pepsi was grouped. Thank
Yep.
you.
There you go. No problem. No problem. Well,
I
if
was
there's
using Control G to group. What was the way that you did it from the ribbon? to group?
Lots of ways to group. So I'll put these together. You can right click and you can group right there. You can
Right.
come to picture format, and it's covered up by a chat box right now. You can come to picture format and you can click group. On my quick access toolbar, it's Alt-1 and I can use Control G. So there's 4 ways that I can group, and I use all 4.
Perfect. Thank you.
Well, guys, it's been a joy today. I love teaching this course. I think it's super helpful. People frequently think PowerPoint. I know how to use PowerPoint. Maybe you do. There's always a lot to learn, and I learn new things all the time. I learned some stuff today while I was teaching it that I just noticed and I picked up on. And that's the thing about these tools, is that they change, and there's being lifetime learners when it comes to these kind of things is critical to stay up to date with the latest updates that happen all the time when you're sleeping. They just update on your computer. So continue to practice. Best of luck with your internships. The email address where you can get in touch is down here on the bottom right of this presentation. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see it easier if you have any questions. info@pillarsofwallstreet.com. Let's see if I can actually drag over here. It's how you can get in touch with us if you have any questions. Once again, my name is Brian Bland Clark, and it's been a joy today. So thank you guys very much.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.